Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Here, these chairs are for old people, not for young people. Come on. Om Jnanatirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Shreshtham Manamapi Shachiputramatra Surupam Rupam Tasya Gajamurupuring Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Ataf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm speaking without a verse to introduce this evening. We're sitting in the transcendental presence of Sri Sri Gaurnitai, Srila Prabhupada. Sri Sri Gaurnitai came from the spiritual world. Brajendra Nandan Jai Shachi Sutta Hoilo Shri Balarama Hoilo Nitai Dino Hino Joto Chilo Hariname Udharilo Tar Shaki Jagai Madhai. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda are none other than Krishna and Balaram, who came from the spiritual world to uplift the fallen, the lowly, by giving them the holy names of Krishna and Jagai Madhai and so many others witnessed this, and then they sent out of their causeless mercy His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada to uplift us all on their order with their empowerment, and thus we are the fortunate, most fortunate recipients of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the teachings of Bhagavad Gita as it is in Srimad Bhagavatam, and the whole way of life of Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada brought Krishna consciousness beyond the boundaries of India, so that in the 1960s and 1970s, so many young people especially joined this movement with great hope, and being empowered by Srila Prabhupada, they were able to take Krishna consciousness all over the world and make Hare Krishna a household word. So many centers were established. If we look at the Iskcon of today and the Iskcon of then, there are many differences, and they're not all good differences. A pertinent question could be that what turned a dynamic spiritual movement situated directly on the spiritual platform into a movement that promotes physical bodily yoga, which is not really yoga at all. It's yoga indriya samyamya. Yoga begins with controlling the senses, or yoga is, but bodily yoga, what's called yoga, bodily exercises. And how is it that persons who are enriched with the teachings of the Vedic knowledge. Gita, Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada gave us in so many volumes, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, enriched with this liberating knowledge. How is it that they've become, some of them have become motivational speakers, life coaches, deliberately hiding Krishna? We're supposed to be promoting Krishna consciousness, but in what is called their preaching, deliberately hiding any resemblance of Krishna, or just maybe some vague mention of chanting or singing or something like this. How did it happen to? How has it come to the extent that some critics think that, or they go as far as to say that these persons who are, some of them who are of the prominent leaders in the Krishna conscious movement today are actually agents of Kali. Now, you may not agree with that, but you can see where the objection is coming from. I was speaking fairly recently with a disciple of mine who's made a niche for himself in the government of one of the world's major democracies. Not that he's employed by the government, but he takes up projects for different government agencies who they know him. He has a good track record as he takes up a project, and a project will usually be for 2 years. Different departments of the government will employ him to go into departments of the department or the sectors of the government, maybe so, that have become moribund, not really fulfilling their function. They're going on, but they're not producing good results, underperforming. So his job is to go in and examine what the problem is, work on it, and get the department back to life. That's his job. He told me that in the private sector, it's much easier. You just fire a bunch of people and hire new people. Get in some new blood, some ambitious people. But he said in the government agencies, it's much more difficult, because what happens is that people get stuck in a job and it just becomes a routine. And instead of the government agencies that are supposed to tackle problems like poverty, juvenile delinquency, corruption and things like that, instead of doing their job, they become absorbed in making surveys, collecting statistics, doing the daily duties, making forms for people to fill up, filling up forms themselves. In other words, they become bureaucrats. And he said to me that his observation was that our Iskcon of today is very similar, that many of the leaders, they're not so much leaders as bureaucrats. They go to meetings, they exact taxes, that means they collect, the temples have to pay for the GBCs, and they go to meetings, and then one meeting, another this committee, that committee, but no one sees any real direction or leadership or life. This was his observation, not my observation, which I'm just passing on to you. So what happened to this dynamic spiritual movement? I'm not saying it's completely devoid of life, but it's the hope, the mission, the revolutionary spirit of changing the world, bringing Krishna consciousness to others. It may be that many who join our movement at the present time, they don't even have any idea of this. And they think that the way it is the way it should be. How did Iskcon become so wishy-washy? Well, it didn't happen overnight, obviously. It's there's a history behind that, and I'd like to, for educational purposes, I'd like to speak something about the history. Now, when we speak about history, it's always going to be somewhat subjective. We may get some facts not fully correct. It's difficult exactly to chart the course of history because the different factors that are involved, they're all working simultaneously. I'm going to talk about different factors that affected the course of Iskcon. And it's not that they are all independent, but they're all simultaneously unfolding. So with those qualifiers, with that qualifying statement, I'd like to talk something about the what happened. And some of you may have seen one book I wrote called The Message to the Youth of India, in which it was actually mostly quotes from Srila Prabhupada about the spiritual glory of India, the duty of Indians to spread Krishna consciousness. And one section in that book is factors in the downfall of India. And there are various factors. How the great spiritual culture of India has become reduced to from the spiritual point of view, the very far away from the pristine spiritual culture. So there are various factors, and I gave quotes from Srila Prabhupada's books and his teachings, other parts of his teachings. There are various factors. The influence of Kali Yuga, the fact that the British deliberately undermined Indian culture, the Mayavad has had a major influence. Then the government itself of independent India has deliberately led India on a non-spiritual course. The governments, I should say. So there are various factors. You can't just pinpoint one single thing. So in the same way, there are various factors that have led Iskcon today to be very different in many ways, a very different movement to that which it was in the 1970s. Srila Prabhupada departed this world on November the 14th, 1977. And actually we would expect some change. The world has also changed in many ways. So we would expect some change. But overall, I would not be alone in saying that the change has not been salutary or desirable or what Srila Prabhupada wanted. The most cited, obvious, if we look at the history, the most obvious factor in the change of course of Iskcon was the era of the zonal acharyas, which arose shortly after Srila Prabhupada's departure, there were 11 leading devotees who Srila Prabhupada had appointed to conduct initiations on his behalf, with the understanding at the time that they would initiate after Srila Prabhupada's departure, which they proceeded to do. And Srila Prabhupada even said at one point they would be acharyas in their own zone. So the idea of a zonal acharya wasn't totally proscribed by Srila Prabhupada, or it wasn't totally prescribed also. You got that? Proscribed means forbidden. Prescribed means mandated or recommended. But the way it was executed turned out to be not very good, because soon after these devotees started initiating, an idea was floated that they're all gurus, they're all on the level of Srila Prabhupada, and they should be worshipped as such, and their words should be taken as good as Srila Prabhupada's. So very high status was awarded to them. Most of them were around age 30 and had been devotees less than 10 years. It was a huge responsibility. They were not spiritually mature. And it was in many ways disastrous. Although some good things happened, some very good things happened in that time. The movement kept on expanding. That could be said due to the momentum that was going on from when Srila Prabhupada was present. But the devotees, they were newcomers, were encouraged or preached to put the same kind of faith in them that they, in their present gurus as they had in Srila Prabhupada, which is philosophically correct in one sense. Because there's no such thing as a half guru or a three-quarters guru. Guru is a guru. It's just that you can't have, this my three-quarters father. You know, father's a father. Either he's a father or he's not. Is this your father? Yes or no. There's no gray areas. He's half my father. Well, there may be in the case of, who is that? Agastya. Who is that? There are two, Mitra and Varuna, they're combined semen. Anyway, generally speaking, I'm just giving an example here. So there were excesses in the gurus. They took a very high position in relation to their godbrothers, who they said the godbrothers should worship them to set an example for the new devotees. And they took a very high position above their godbrothers and godsisters and became high-handed, and gradually they fell down one by one. Not all of them, but it fell down grossly in the sense of breaking the regulative principles, which was a huge shock to everyone, especially to the disciples who were told these are pure devotees. And so many who joined, they left in bitterness. The various Gauriya Maths came up because the Gauriya Math gurus, some of them found out, there's a big field out there and we can go and just start initiating people. Iskcon would do the preaching, and then the Gauriya Math people would come and initiate them. The usual scenario was they'd just initiate people on the spot, whether they were chanting, whether they weren't chanting, whether they were following the principles or not. It generally came to be known as poaching, because they would go around Iskcon congregations and just catch people, and it goes on to the present day, but not so much. Then the Ritvik movement came up, some speculation. Well, Prabhupada, he couldn't have appointed these people as gurus because Prabhupada knows everything, and he couldn't have made such a big mistake as to appoint them as gurus. Therefore, he must have not wanted, and no one can be a guru anymore, so no more gurus. Only Prabhupada is initiating. So various devotees became victims of this wrong idea, and it was disastrous. But there were also, it wasn't just the institution of the Zonla Acharyas. It's complex. There was competition between the acharyas as they were. Oh, another major thing, they made an acharya board of 11 devotees, which it superseded, or it what's the word? It took the power from the Prabhupada made the GBC the managing body, ultimate managing authority, Prabhupada said, for the whole movement. But then the Acharya board said, look, we 11, we decide. So although officially they had no status, but what the GBC had to follow them because they were more powerful. And there are all kinds of things, just like they are more powerful because the devotees listen to their gurus and not to anyone else. And that was also a source of great contention for the temple presidents, because they would preach to people, they'd make them devotees, then the gurus would initiate, and in many cases, then the people who were being made devotee, the people who were making them devotees had no say in their lives, and all of a sudden the guru may just come and pull them out. It's my disciple, you don't interfere. There are scenarios where, say there's a guru for one zone, the guru zone is changed, just like in Hawaii. The guru there, it means everyone in one temple would be the disciple of one guru. Then the zone of Hawaii, this is just one example, was changed, went from one guru to another. So all the devotees in the temple, with the exception of very few, mostly Prabhupada disciples, they were the disciples of one guru, then he just pulled them all out. And the incoming guru had to provide some new manpower from his zone. So like that, it was very disturbing in so many ways. Another factor was a shift from book distribution to selling paraphernalia. That devotees became expert salesmen in selling books. And then because it was thought, well, they're good at selling, they could sell. The Hong Kong paintings were discovered, that you can buy paintings very cheaply from Hong Kong that are copies of local artists. They can make copies of any painting you like, so you can get very cheaply paintings in Hong Kong and sell them at a good price in the West. They're good level of painting, oil paintings or whatever. So devotees would go door to door, growing their hair, not saying anything about Krishna, presenting themselves as painting salesmen, which they were. They were painting salesmen, and it was good money. It was because you get them cheap in Hong Kong, buy them wholesale, and sell them for a good price. And it brings in lots of money. And there was one thing, in America, one of the gurus discovered you could buy all these vinyl 33 revolution per minute records. Younger people may not have seen this. Your gramophone record. You can buy them for next to nothing, the ones that don't sell in the shops. And you take them out on the streets and you sell them to people. You say this is Jimi Hendrix. It's not Jimi Hendrix, but you say it is. And people like to buy things for sense gratification, like pictures, paintings. Paintings of dogs were the most popular. And there are all kinds of things. The devotees were running candle factories, making candles. You produce them for next to nothing and sell them for a good price. And the people are happy with the book. You find the books are thrown away in many cases. They were sold very forcefully to people in the airports, and you'd find the waste bins full of books. People, what did I buy that for? Throw it away. Pick it out of the bin, sell it to someone else. Take it out of the bin, sell it to... So candles, moose, this thing you run up and down people's backs. So they'd have the women especially do that. They'd go in the offices and run it up and down the back of someone. It's a wooden back spine massager. And the men like that. Oh, and then they'd buy it. And it's selling all kinds of things. And the money was used for purchasing properties. It was supposed to be used for book distribution. I remember when I was just visiting England in 1979. I was just visiting, coming from Bangladesh, and a team of us were sent to sell records. Actually, not in England, in Scandinavia, but after several months of selling records, which was a real horrible thing to do. I mean, we didn't like it at all, but then we bought 4 Mercedes-Benz vehicles, which we drove over. They were actually records by Harikesh, with devotee songs, but they were in rock and roll genre. So you had Krishna, Kirtana, Gana, Nartana, Paro. So, like some completely rasa bas. Like the mood of the song was completely different from the humility in the Vaishnav song. And then there was rubbish. I mean, the level of musically, it was, I didn't know because I don't know anything about music. But one of our devotees said he went in a shop, because he would go and he went in a record shop and the guy played it and he said, "Come on, what are you selling this for? This is rubbish. Musically, this band would never get signed up by a commercial company." So it was, anyway, they were selling all kinds of things. Now, especially with these paintings, they brought a lot of money, but the devotees would grow their hair long. In England, they had a whole fleet of Volvo cars, which are quite prestigious, because the idea you should look like you're prestigious. You're not just some cheap guy off the street. And going in materialistic people's houses and talking with them in a materialistic way, often late at night, because you go and visit the karmis when they come home from work, and the karmis sleep at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, so you'll be out and come back late. And so money, I was talking about the money was supposed to be for producing. They say we'll give away the books, but in many cases they say it's for book. We'll increase the book distribution. That was the original idea. We'll increase the book distribution by selling paraphernalia. We can get much more money, much more easily, without upsetting the public, by selling sense gratificatory items that they like. But what happened was you got these potential book points, and many times the books weren't distributed, and you'd find this book scores, great book scores, but actually they never distributed the books. It was only potential books. It was cheating, actually. And it may still be going on in some parts of the world, such things. Sponsored books in India. They don't all get distributed. So I'm told. Anyway, there are various results of this. One thing, a lot of money came into Iskcon. Easy money, cheap money. By cheating, actually, by telling people these are original paintings from British artists. And by associating with materialistic people and not talking to them about Krishna or trying to sell them a book, then the devotees themselves became materialistic. And again, there's a lot of simplification here and generalization. It's not true in every case that everyone became materialistic. And then you get things like, you get these bright-faced young men going door to door, and then you get the bored housewives welcoming them in. Yes. You can imagine. And devotees, because they come in late at night, then they wouldn't be up early in the morning, and they're not preaching, they're just talking all rubbish in the name of preaching, making money. And they lose taste for Krishna consciousness, and they think, well, I could be making money for myself. And many of them did. They started doing it for themselves and stopping giving money. They just moved out of the temple and did it for themselves. And they saw, oh, the big gurus are living in such opulence and luxury. Why should I do it for them? They didn't see the gurus as being very spiritual people, because the gurus were engaging them in what they couldn't see the link with Krishna. They didn't feel that the Guru is giving me Krishna. They felt the Guru is giving me a bunch of paintings or records to sell, and which is of no real benefit to anyone. And of course, properties were bought, that's true. The movement became flush with money, but money, if it's not used judiciously, can become a cause of fall down. Kanaka Kamini. Money and women, they're very dangerous in spiritual life. As Lord Jesus Christ is famous as having said, money is the root of all evil. But that's not exactly what he said. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. So, that was the leaders themselves with so much money, many were living a very opulent life with the best cars and the best watches and all this kind of thing. At Villa Vrindavan, the Bhagavan, he became known as the Sun King. That was the title of Louis the something of France, who lived in great opulence. So Bhagavan was called that, and they called him the emperor because he was like that. He was very regal in his demeanor and living a very opulent life and taking a very high and controlling position. So when the leaders, they were perceived as being materialistic. It was used for preaching. We can't say, again, it's not, you just can't see one side. Because Bhagavan was inviting big people from society. Just like Prabhupada, he got his quarters in London and New York and Melbourne, and opulent quarters. And then he invited important people to speak with. So Bhagavan was doing that, and then he brought in some important people into there was one singer called Polystyrene who was famous, and she became his disciple, and there were some others and this and that. So he was bringing in prominent people and this and that. But it became very money-oriented. Then devotees would have quotas. You have to bring in so much money. They were pushed to bring in so much money, a lot of pushing for that. And devotees, they felt more like money-making machines than that. The leaders are more interested in making me bring in money than helping me to develop in spiritual life. The money becomes more important. You have to go out and bring so much money. You don't get up in the morning for Mangalati. You may or may not chant your rounds. You're always in a daze because you have such late nights. You don't get enough sleep, but Anyway, just don't moan, don't groan, just go out and pick the bone. That was the motto, which you won't understand unless you understand low-class English. So, the result of all this, if we apply the tenets of spiritual science, we're going to speak about this from a philosophical point of view, from the philosophical understanding of Krishna consciousness, is that the devotees lost the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. The mercy comes from Jare Dekho Tare Kaha Krishna Upadesh, by giving people Krishna consciousness. The leaders of the society are supposed to give Krishna consciousness to the followers. It's not, there is a hierarchy. They're supposed to be merciful in that regard. What they've received, they're supposed to give. That means by speaking it and by living it, by practice and by precept, both. And then the devotees, the movement is meant for giving that to others, giving Krishna consciousness to others by going out in public and chanting the holy names, by speaking the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, by distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, by holding festivals that are very clearly Hare Krishna festivals. But if you don't do that, then you don't get if you do that, you get the mercy. And wonderful things can happen. If you don't do that, then you lose the mercy. Yasya aprasada nagati katopi. If we fail to get the mercy, or if we displease the pure devotee Acharya, then we're going nowhere. Nagati katopi. Now there are other factors involved also, because Srila Prabhupada arrived at an opportune moment in America, when the hippie movement was just beginning to flourish. And although Srila Prabhupada didn't have a very good opinion in some ways of hippies, at the same time he recognized they are our best customers. They're already detached from their families. They're already they're looking for something different and better. They're not after the materialistic goals of American society, and they're ready to follow a spiritual path. So most of Srila Prabhupada's disciples came from the hippie background. Now, the hippie phenomenon, well, still today there are people they call hippies, even younger people. But the whole hippie movement really started to die out toward the middle of the 1970s. It was no longer new and fresh. And what happened in the 1980s was the advent of the yuppies, who were the next generation, or the next age group. They talk about this, what, X generation and me generation, every 10 years or so they have. So the yuppies, YUP, young urban professional, or sometimes said young up-and-coming professional. The next generation, they didn't want to be hippies. They thought, hey, look, there's money out there, let's get a good job and make money. And so they didn't have long hair. They kept their hair reasonably short, they dressed in suits, they're ambitious. Just as the hippies had been deliberately, expressively, pointedly non-materialistic in their understanding of non-materialistic. The hippies were not interested in making lots of money and having a good career. They dropped out of society. Well, the yuppies were just the opposite. They wanted to have a good career, get ahead, make lots of money. So the atmosphere in the Western countries for getting young people to join it was no longer there. Because the young people in general were especially the middle class, the hippies mostly came from the middle class, and they were getting into becoming quite materialistic. And so it became more difficult to convince people to join. It wasn't that, which was a common thing or normal thing in the hippie days. Not in every case, but in many cases, people would they'd just meet the devotees and they'd join. Immediately, or in 1 day, or 2 days, or 2 weeks, or something like that. That didn't happen. Neither did people didn't want to join. They had different goals. Now what had happened, big properties like Villa Vrindavan in Italy were purchased with the money from paraphernalia sales. Then the gurus fell down, and the devotees were devastated. Most of the devotees left because they lost faith that you told us these are pure devotees. They're not pure devotees. This is how they were seen. They're low-class people. Actually, they're devotees, but they got misled or something. They're just on the gross platform, like anyone else. So that many of them lost faith in Krishna consciousness altogether, or they lost faith in Iskcon and the leadership, or the remaining leadership of Iskcon, and either they went to the Gauriya Math, or they just lived at home and practiced. And in many cases the leadership had been very, very heavy, so very controlling, with an atmosphere of coercion and force. So they didn't want to be part of the. Oh, another thing, the Zonlacharyas, they were competing. Who can get the biggest buildings, distribute the most books? Well, that was good. And you know, who is the greatest of them all? Guru on the wall, who is the greatest of them all? Hansadutta made a song like that. He released an album. His song went like that. When the Guru left, then there was many just left also. They lost faith, and they were no longer felt they're obliged or any pressure on them. They just left. So you had these big projects like Villa Vrindavan, and all of a sudden you had no devotees. And the new people weren't joining. And they'd bring in a new guru in GBC, but the people didn't have faith. The faith was shattered. So, of course, Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish varnashram villages and farms, but that wasn't there. So when devotees, they didn't have an alternative to go to, it's a Krishna conscious alternative to where they want to live a peaceful family life in Krishna consciousness. Not everyone's going to be a commando, full-blooded missionary all their life. So even if devotees just wanted to live a peaceful life, then as a grihasta in a Krishna conscious community, they found themselves all of a sudden, they leave the temple and they're out in the big bad world, and it's a very materialistic atmosphere. And those who remained devotees, they had to adjust to that atmosphere just to survive. So they remained devotees, but then they picked up various materialistic attitudes by bad association. You've got to look after yourself. You got to get a good education, and they tell their kids you got to have a good education, which means school education. And in this way, they brought the materialistic ethos into Iskcon, because they'd come to temples time to time, and they'd preach. If anyone wanted to join, they said, "Don't join. I joined, I got cheated, you don't join." Or they'd say, "Look, we got to have good stopped sending our kids to the gurukuls. There was a big mess with the gurukuls. So they said, okay, Gurukul doesn't work. We got to send our kids to the karmi schools. I didn't use the word karmi anymore because they'd become karmis themselves, mixed up. Somewhat karmi, somewhat devotee. So, in other words, they subscribed to the values of the demoniac society that they had left to become devotees. So you can see how the outside influences started to come inside. Okay, there's a lot more to say, and if I say all now, then I don't want to keep you up late. You were telling me about one great preacher who comes here, and she gives classes that go on till 11 o'clock at night. I'm not going to do that. So, Krishna willing, I'll continue this a little later. It may not be very much appreciated that I give talks like this by certain members of this movement, but then others also appreciate it. It's not directly spiritual, but it's educational. And we shouldn't live in la-la land or cuckoo land or just in some imagination that everything in the movement is glorious and wonderful. In one sense it is, in another sense it isn't. And it does make sense to have a realistic understanding also. That's my outlook. So, sorry if you don't like it. But actually these kind of talks, somehow they seem to be more popular than... If I give so many talks on Vishnu Sahasranam, which is direct glorification of Krishna. And at least if we see by YouTube hits, that's in my... They get the lowest number of hits by far, isn't it? Whereas if I talk on something controversial, boom, it goes up. When will we have a taste for pure Krishna Katha? There was I remember some time ago, there was one disciple of Gaura Govinda Maharaj was publishing Gaura Govinda Maharaj's lectures and this and that. He still does. And he published in his magazine that someone had written to him that, why don't you write about why all this talk about love of Krishna and all this kind of thing? Why don't you discuss about the issues? And Madhavananda said, well, this is the solution to the issues, is that we should broadcast Krishna Katha. Srila Prabhupada, he also said that. It's recorded, at least in Prabhupada Lamata. Prabhupada had said that instead of meetings, resolutions, revolutions, and no solutions, there should be kirtan. So that is really the solution, is that we all become absorbed in Krishna Katha. So why don't I just speak direct Krishna Katha? Well, like I say, there's some education may be helpful also. It may have the effect of discouraging some, but at least I can say about myself, I've lived through and I'm living through all these things, and I'm not discouraged in Krishna consciousness. I'm completely into it. I really want to be Krishna conscious and try to share that with others. So it's not a logical conclusion to become discouraged because there have been so many faults. Because that Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita. What is that? Savarambha hidoshena. That in every endeavor there is some kind of fault. Sadosham api natyajet. Even though there's some fault in an activity, it should not be given up. So we have to keep the ideal of Krishna consciousness strong. It's there. Krishna's there. He's present as His holy name. So we can tap into that. So don't give up hope. I'm just trying to present some of the things that have happened. Many of the things are in the past. It's not going on so much nowadays, but the past has shaped the present. The actual reality is that Krishna is in Vrindavan, but for us, we're here in this world, and we're trying to practice Krishna consciousness within this world and within this society called the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So this analysis is, why is the Krishna consciousness movement not delivering exactly as Prabhupada delivered? I don't think anyone could deny that, unless they're really lying, that our movement, it is not 100% dedicated to delivering what Prabhupada gave, because many things are very different. Prabhupada definitely didn't give yoga courses and motivational guruism. It would be hard to deny that the movement is, if you see the public face of the movement, that it's offering, what it presents to the public in many cases is very different to what Prabhupada presented and told us to present. So there are causes for concern. And then I get criticized, well, why don't you discuss with the leaders? Why just don't involve the junior devotees? Well, you're giving your lives to this. You should know what you're giving your life to, and what you should aspire for, because then you also, I would think that people joining our movement nowadays would think that yoga is very important. It's not at all important. Not at all. Zero. This bodily yoga is of zero importance to Krishna consciousness. Individual devotees could do some yoga, as I do also, sometimes, for bodily health, so the body may be in fit shape to serve Krishna. But as far as, it's got absolutely nothing to do with our mission. So, Hare Krishna, I'll plan on speaking more about this, maybe tomorrow. There are various factors which have, Maya has hit this movement very strongly in various ways. And I plan to speak about that more. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya vacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.